time for some more kitchen table astronomy with Hampshire College astronomer Dr. Salman Hameed at your Amherst kitchen table. In the coming weeks, we're going to do a segment about something that we have talked a lot about and that we are quite skeptical of. Space tourism. You're going to go and potentially experience a friend who is going to be a space tourist.
Yes, so I am going to New Mexico. So this particular flight is for Virgin Galactic. And this person, she's from Pakistan. So she's the first Pakistani space tourist and things like that. So yeah, I was invited to go and watch it. I think it would be really cool. I mean, yes, we have talked about it. There is skepticism. But on the other hand, this will also be an opportunity to actually see up close, in some sense, what happens. And how do people think about it, and so on and so forth. So I'm excited, and I would love to talk about it after I come back. Not to mention that I get to go back to Las Cruces, New Mexico State, where I did my PhD.
Nice.
So I'm really looking forward to visiting the department again. I absolutely loved it. And yes, Amherst is great. Fabulous 413 is fabulous. But I absolutely love New Mexico and the weather over there and the big skies.
Yeah.
And
They have better aliens than we do.
better aliens, real ones, not the fake ones.
But today we are talking about the moon, where science fiction has warned us never to travel because potentially it is one of the best places in our solar system for life. What are we talking about today?
So we are talking about Jupiter's moon, Europa. And for people who did not get the reference that Monty made, that is to 2010, the sequel to 2001: Space Odyssey. And few people have read the book, and few are still watched that sequel. I think it's fine, it's a good sequel. But spoiler alert, but that came out like 40 years ago, so I think it's okay. But at the end of the movie and the book, I think as well, Arthur C. Clarke's warning comes in that, or the aliens in Space Odyssey, whatever they are, that all worlds are yours except Europa. Attempt no landing there. And at the time, actually, we did not know that Europa had an ocean under the ice sheet. We did not know it was an interesting place. So the most likely explanation is that Arthur C. Clarke is an alien.
Love it.
But
always jump right to alien. That's what science says. When you don't know something, must be an alien. UAP added to the Merriam-Webster dictionary last week, though.
Wow,
Yeah.
That is really cool. And
Unidentified aerial phenomenon. Yeah.
And I should mention that with that kind of scrutiny, as I gave you, I should be testifying in front of Congress.
Exactly.
But yeah, so the ocean of Europa is an interesting place. We know that normally people used to think in terms of habitable zone, and that is the distance of a planet from its star where water can exist in liquid form. So of course the Earth is in the habitable zone. It's neither too close or too far away, and so the water can exist in liquid form. It's also called the Goldilocks zone. But with moons of giant planets like Jupiter and Saturn, we discovered that you can also have large moons where the interior is being heated by something called like the tidal forces of the giant planet, meaning to say it squishes it, like near side is experiencing a little more gravity than the far side, and because it's an elliptical orbit, as it goes around, the interior got sort of like squished, and you can actually have volcanoes. Now, on top of it, like Europa, you have an ice sheet. So you can have liquid water or ice, basically, that is melting because of the underwater volcanoes, but it's not evaporating because you have an ice sheet on top. Mm-hmm. So that's what makes Europa a really exciting place. If you get too close, there is another moon, big moon, Io. It's all volcanism. But so Europa is a little bit farther away, that there is an ice sheet. And also there are other moons, Ganymede and Callisto, which we also think might be interesting. But Europa by far is a fascinating place. We know there is liquid water ocean, and we also know that water is salty. And so The conditions are there for life and potentially for life, and that's what a lot of focus is on.
There was some recent discoveries about Europa.
Back to James Webb Space Telescope. Cannot take a break from it. But it actually identified, it is also, we always talk about galaxies that are far, far away, but it is also looking at our own solar system. And again, it is looking in the infrared with very high precision. And so there was Hubble Space Telescope observations that had found, that actually showed that there is definitely sodium chloride or salt in the oceans of Europa. So James Webb Space Telescope looked at in the infrared, and it found evidence of carbon dioxide. And it's not even distributed over the entire moon, but rather a much more localized region. The region is called Terra Regio, and it finds that there is a definite signal of carbon dioxide, and more interestingly, it looks like it is coming from the ocean underneath. Because you can have a signal like that, for example, of carbon coming from meteoroids crashing on it and things like that. But this particular region is what astronomers technically call a chaos region, because it's sort of like, the material is mixing up from the ocean underneath. So there is ice sheet, and it has been cracked up a little, and the ocean water is gurgling through to a certain degree. And they found signal of carbon dioxide in that region.
And why is that exciting?
Well, we don't know why there is carbon dioxide in there, but it tells you potentially that carbon, which is an important element for life, that it exists there, and it exists there mixed up with the ocean. So that means that something is producing it. Now, there can be many different ways to produce carbon dioxide, but it shows that the conditions in the oceans of Europa may be similar to conditions on Earth. And so potentially there can be life. So I don't think anybody is claiming yet that this carbon dioxide is being burped out.
I am. Europa, mermaids and mermen.
That's right. But it just tells you that the conditions in Europa's oceans contain carbon, and it's also oxygenated if it's carbon dioxide. So it just leads to one step closer to thinking about, well, this is an interesting place. This is a place which is, and no pun intended, completely alien in terms of the way we think about life, but rather it is a place where the conditions are such that we are familiar with those conditions here on Earth, where life is plentiful.
Is there a plan, in violation of Arthur C. Clarke's cautionary tale in 2010, to go to Europa and maybe take a sample to see if there actually is life in the underwater ocean of that moon of Jupiter?
Absolutely. So next year there is a big NASA mission going. It's called Europa Clipper mission. It's going to go over there, observe Europa pretty closely. That is its primary mission. It's not going to send sort of like, robot probe yet.
It will attempt no landing there.
No landing there. There is another mission from the European Space Agency, which is called JUICE. No connection to Lizzo, but it is a Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer. That its primary target is Ganymede, actually, but it's also going to observe Europa and Callisto. Both of these missions, I think, are expected to get there around 2030, and so there's going to be a lot of studies that are going to be there. One other thing, considering about the same observation that I mentioned about the detection of carbon dioxide, one thing that scientists were looking for were actually plumes from Europa emanating out. There were some detections from Hubble Space Telescope, and they did not find it. The reason it's connected is because one of the things they're trying to do is that you can actually fly close to Europa. So, for example, with Europa Clipper, and it can actually sample the material coming from the oceans below. Unfortunately, even though there were couple of potential detections before, this new observations by James Webb Space Telescope did not find any plumes that could be detected. Doesn't mean that the plumes are not there anymore, but it's possible that they may be periodic, they may not, or at least sort of like, they don't stay for a long time, or they come in and out for various reasons. But that's another thing, that when the mission goes, even without landing on Europa, you can actually analyze material that's coming out. That has been done for Saturn's moon, Enceladus. And so, I mean, these places are fascinating, and I would bet, and so Monty, to your claim about aliens, I think it would be weirder if we go and look at the oceans of these moons, which we know have organic compounds. We know because they're common in the universe, they are brought in by meteoroids and other places. We know there is heat because there are underwater volcanoes, and you have liquid water. I mean, to think about, for billions of years, those conditions have existed, and even microbes didn't come about. I think, to me, that would be far more surprising than to find microbes, which would be amazing. What kind of life form would that be? Would it be based on DNA? Would it be different types of molecules? So on and so forth. So there'll be fascinating questions, but to me, it would be far more surprising if there is no life there.
And if we found even that one microbe, it would change the entire course of human events.
Yeah, we would just have to think very differently, because then it would mean that, well, life is actually really, really common. And you mentioned 2010 or 2001 Space Odyssey, of course. If you have less patience for longer films, there was a very small indie film called Europa Report that came out, I think, about 6-7 years ago. Find it. It's like, low budget, sci-fi, thoughtful, but it's sort of like, a sober film about a mission to Europa. So that's another take on that.
And with U2 taking over the Sphere in Las Vegas, they're doing Octoon Baby, which was, of course, a precursor to what might be their greatest album, Zooropa.
All right, that's right. Well, I don't know if there is life on Zooropa or not. Intelligent life, I don't know. Oh, I shouldn't criticize.
Don't make fun of Bono.
Bono, I'm sorry.